What's up, guys? This is Steven Spikes here at the Spike Signal, and today I'm coming to y'all to talk about Bodom Beach Terror by Children of Bodom, some of the music theory behind the scenes in order to make the song sound so unique and so interesting throughout its entire duration. That's coming up right now here on the Spike Signal. So this song was of particular interest for me to do for a sheet music analysis because there's a lot of very kind of technical things going on in the song in order to give the song not just a lot of bite, but a lot of movement from riff to riff and passage to passage. So I'm looking forward to getting into some of that right now. Let's go ahead and jump right on into the song. I'm going to go ahead and play the main riff for you, and then we'll come back and talk about it in just a moment. Starts off with a super cool drum beat. Very simple, but awesome. Okay, so a couple things I want to discuss right off the back. So this song employs key changes as well as unique modes in order to get a very particular and cool sound. So if you'll notice, we are in the key of E Phrygian right here. Now we're in D standard tuning, which, we'll explain kind of why you see the tabs as they are. I just wanted to point that out. But this first riff is within the key of E Phrygian. Now that is the third mode of C minor, or the fifth mode of A minor, if you wanted to look at it that way. E Phrygian, like any Phrygian scale, has a flat 2 that gives a lot of punch, a lot of bite, and a lot of intensity to any riff that it's employed in. And we're going to observe that right here in a moment. Let's go ahead and play it, and I'll point out where the flat 2 comes in. So if you'll look right here, you see the flat 2 coming in to use right here. E Phrygian right here, then that F is a half step away. E Phrygian being the 1, the F right here, right in this part, being the flat 2. That note is what gives you the bite and the aggression that is within this kind of intro riff right here. So it's really cool stuff going on there. Makes it sound very powerful, very intense, and a lot of energy and emphasis is given to it from employing this. So one thing you'll notice right here, something Children of Bodom is doing, they're actually, for this chord right here, employing a perfect 4th chord. Now what that does is that allows them to utilize that kind of chord without getting the extreme dissonance from a perfect, or not a perfect, but a flat 5th chord, which is what the B note in this key would have accompanied with it. So just kind of a cool, simple thing I just saw was in there, thought I should point it out, thought it was kind of cool and everything. So let's go ahead and continue on and see what else we have going on in here. So something else I wanted to point out in the pads really quick. Let's go ahead and get down there. Now, these pads, if obviously if you hear the song, you see the pads going up in conjunction with the guitar. Now, it's kind of, once again, sort of a simple thing, but the amount of intensity they add to it is really great. This is a very kind of prototypical move for most melodic death metal music. You'll have a pad going on playing the exact same things as the guitars, and you kind of get one singular, really cool, really powerful, really intense sound that just, to me, sounds absolutely epic. And, although this is done often, I wanted to point that out here just because it is really cool. Going with the chords perfectly, sounded great. One more thing I wanted to point out, and you can actually hear this in the song too. There's a little bit of like a stutter sound there the pads do, which just add kind of that little bit extra, like, bit of intensity and uncertainness before we get into the first verse. So let's go ahead and get up there to the first verse and look at everything that's going on here. I'm going to stop it right there because we already have quite a few things going on here. Now, the interesting thing about the very first verse of the song is that there's sort of a couple different ways to look at it. Now, how I've noted it right here in this tab is in the key of G minor. You have two flats, it's in the key of G minor. However, there is a lot of emphasis on the D note. So now the reason I put G minor is because it was basically it allowed for the least amount of accidentals in the actual passage. But just keep in mind, there's a couple ways to look at this. You could also very reasonably interpret it from the standpoint of being in D minor, because there's so much emphasis on the D notes all right over here in this vicinity especially, and just a couple different ways to look at it. So just wanted to kind of note that and go ahead and move on now. Now, what that does is it gives us a little bit of movement and a little bit of a change before getting into the next part of the song, just mixing things up and pushing the song forward as we get into the verse. So let's go ahead and hit it. So it's a very different sound, a very different feel than the one before, but similar enough to make it still sound cohesive and unified, because on the circle of fifths, it's only 2 keys away, not like, 5 keys away or 6 keys away, only 2. So very, very good stuff right there. The next thing I wanted to point out, and this will be something that we'll be returning to consistently, is Children of Bodom's use of chromaticism within their songs. So if we look right here, and I'll play it just a measure back. So in that kind of like chromatic sort of unhinged, unstable sounding movement, we have them sort of shred up in sextuplets, up a few octaves and everything like that, or about an octave and a half more precisely. And what that does there is just gives, once again, a little bit of unhingedness, a little bit of uncertainty and unstableness that Children of Bodom is so characteristic for. They employ lots of stuff like this in their songs to give their songs really kind of like a crazy, unhinged, unstable feeling to them amongst the melody and the more soaring passages that they also employ. So it's a very kind of heavy and methodical juxtaposition they use to get these sorts of feelings. And one element of those are the chromaticism that are employed in an example like right here. So let's go ahead and let's keep going. Let's see what else we got here to look at. Something else I wanted to talk about that's going on in the verse, and we're going to see this over and over again here. I'm just going to keep coming back to it one time after another, but wanted to point out again, Children of Bodom is once again using some sort of non-diatonic chords, some accidentals here to just give the song that much more of an unhinged, kind of unstable, crazy feeling to it. And the cool thing, especially in this song, even though it's non-diatonic and it doesn't necessarily fit within the scale, when you're listening to it, it feels close enough and unified enough to what's going on to sort of, feel like it would fit in well enough. So just kind of cool stuff right there, worth pointing out. Here's the example of it right here. Just wanted to get at that. Aside from that, the verse is, you might say fairly standards and everything. We have a lot of sort of fast tremolo picking down on the lowest string, some pull-off action on the string above. As we move into the next part of the song, this section right here. So in this section, I would say we kind of now at this point more definitively transition to the key of D minor. So what you have here are essentially a series of very percussive lines alternating between the D and the E. Essentially moving back and forth between that 1 and that 2 right there. And then as the part continues, you have a little bit of kind of like chromaticism, a little bit of kind of, again, out of key, like non-diatonic chords, just to sort of give back that insanity to the song. Now, one part that I do hear in the song itself that I don't really like hear or observe in this actual tab is the layering around this section as this part kind of repeats, as the percussive part repeats. I feel like there's an octave or some kind of like small harmony played at the same time as this on the same rhythm, just kind of adding a little more texture to it, so that's not here. I just wanted to point that out because I do feel like I hear that when I listen to the song for real and everything. The last part about this section. So again, you have a little bit of like kind of craziness. If I recall in the song, there's some whammy action right here in this section, just to give a little bit of, again, kind of an unhinged, uncertain feel before moving into the next section of the song. So kind of chromatic once again, typical Children of Bodom right here. Let's go ahead and move into the next passage. Okay, so this next section is certainly open for interpretation. I have looked at it a few different ways. I think there are a few different reasonable ways to look at it. What I kind of came up with for my interpretation of this was that in the pre-chorus there are consistent modulations between the key of B minor and the key of E minor, essentially speaking. So what I view is going down here as this bar right here, B minor, E minor scale, E minor scale, E minor scale, E minor scale, staying in B minor right here as it ascends. So what I interpret to be going on here, and like I said, I'm sure there's better ways to look at this or different ways or more advanced ways. What I interpret this to be doing here is playing B within the key of B minor, the B note, if you would. And there are a couple other things here, like what the pads are doing that sort of support that. And then moving up to the key of E minor. Now, within the key of E minor, playing the C chord, which would essentially be a C Lydian chord within that. So that's how I'm looking at this. It's the method which, once again, kind of nets you the least amount of accidentals, which is just how I like want to look at this right now. Like I said, if there's a better way to look at this, please let me know. But what I find to be going on here is pretty much that, and it's kind of an interplay between these two things. Back to the B, to the C. And, you know, if you'll look, one thing you have in B minor is a C sharp, which is located right here. You know, so you have a C sharp. Whereas here, this is an actual C chord being played. It's not a C sharp chord, it's a C chord. So that's pretty much my justification between jumping back and forth between those things. Like I said, I'm sure there's probably other ways to look at it or better ways to look at it. This is just kind of what I've taken from it in the time that I've spent looking at it. So if you have a better way to look at it, please let me know. I'd be happy to hear it. But for the purposes of this, we'll continue on with this sort of interpretation. The next thing that I wanted to talk about in this section directly is a small thing, very small thing, but in both sides, in both speakers, in both sides of the stereo field, you hear the guitar is doing slightly different things, and you can actually even hear that right here as well. If you were to only listen to the guitars, hopefully you can hear just slight differences between them, slight variations and nuances between them. So again, something very, very small, but if you do a lot of stuff like that cumulatively over the course of a song, it adds up to a really cool kind of outcome that sounds really unique and tight. So let's go ahead and keep on going to the chorus. Oh, forgot to unsolo that stuff. There we go. Okay. So we continue on. Now this section all right here, leading up right before the chorus, is all in B. It's all in B, so let's go ahead and just take a quick look at what's going on here. Very standard progression for melodic death metal. You go from the 1 to there, basically ascending upwards. Essentially, at this point, we're still in the key of E minor, so we essentially move to the 5, to the flat 6, to the flat 7. It wants to pull back to that 1, and then it does. And the chorus is in E minor. So we're going to go ahead and look at that in just a second. Just want to, as always, point out, like, got a little cool whammy thing going on right here to give a little bit of extra intensity as it leads in. Then the chorus starts. So Just talking about the very first part of the chorus. So at this point, it's just the guitars going, no screaming or anything like that that enters right at this moment. There are essentially movements from within the key of E minor. Once again, there are movements from the E minor to the B minor to the flat 5 to the C to the flat 6 to the D, which is the flat 7. So all done fairly quickly. Now, something cool happening right after that right here is that essentially, more or less, the same sort of thing is played right here, just in power chords an octave higher, which is pretty cool and not something I see super common often, so like this is pretty cool. Definitely something worth doing. And then it gets into the next part of the chorus, and let's just go ahead and hit it. Doing basically the same things. Then it gets into the part with the lead line, which we'll talk about in just a second. One thing I did want to point out here, so this tab for the chorus, it does not show anything happening for the pads. Now, the pads are right here, and as you can see, they are more or less blank. What I hear the pads doing in this section are stabs following along the chords, so just quick touches of the keys following along with the chords, eighth notes or something like that, just to give a little bit of extra flair in sort of the higher areas of the frequency spectrum. Not shown here. I do hear it in the actual song, though. Just wanted to point that out. All right, so let's get back to the lead. Okay. Very, very cool part right here. So let's go ahead and just see what the chords are doing, first of all, in this section. So we have, nothing really crazy going on. We have a 1 to the 5, back to the 1, to the flat 7, to the flat 6, back to the flat 7, and finally, and I lost my frickin' place, finally to the 4 and the 5 to close it out. Okay. So the pads are following along here. You can actually hear them in the song. There are pads in the actual song too. And let's see what the lead lines are doing. They would be located right up over here. So these notes right here, once again, from the chord that is being played, that is being implied here, essentially what I've done is just notated what the extensions would be. And you know what I can even do? And so what I've done here is basically just made it super explicit to show what the lead line is doing in relation to the chords right here. So these numbers right here represent what is going on in relation to the implied chords. As you can see, there are a lot of 3s and 5s and stuff like that. So it's pretty much chord tone soloing right here, more or less. So I'm going to go ahead and bring back all the stuff that I took out right now, and then we're going to keep continuing and moving on. Repeats the same part. And it goes again. Okay. So that's the chorus right there. So let's go ahead and get on to the next part. Okay. So this is the intro riff played over again. Pretty much the exact same thing. I didn't really hear any differences at all with it. So yeah, good stuff right there. So now the next few sections of the song are pretty freaking similar. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to see what the next part of the song I want to talk about is. Okay, so now we get to the part of the song that is referred to as the break. Now, what this part of the song essentially does is it returns to E Phrygian, which was the mode, the scale, whatever you want to call it, used in the very first part of the song. So let's go ahead and take a listen to this E Phrygian section. Okay. So it transitioned back to E Phrygian, and again, we can tell that it's E Phrygian because the F natural is included at certain locations. So right here is an example of the F natural being included. That's right in that section. So a lot of very fast kind of tremolo stuff and everything, kind of jumping all around, using some keys out, some notes outside of the scale as well, just grabbing all kinds of things in order to make it sound really powerful and really strong here. So good stuff going on right there. Let's go ahead and continue. This part's very intense. All guitars and bass are going here. Then what you see in this section right here is that there are actually some like higher parts being played at the same time as the lower parts to just, again, kind of give some like more extra insanity and craziness to everything you're hearing. So it changed up. Things kind of got a little bit higher, got a little more intense and aggressive. You can see right here, there's, a B being played. There's a right up here, there's an E being or an F being played. Whereas when you move over here to this section, they take a few out of key notes, they go higher and everything, and just really gives the sense that things are just kind of breaking down and freaking out here. Okay, so then the drum solo, or not the drum solo, the guitar solo starts and stuff gets really cool here. So for this part of the song, we're going to be within the key of A minor still. So let's go ahead and take a look at what the solo is doing. So first we're going to take a look at what chords are going on here, going from a D to an E minor. And that's kind of it, not too much going on there because the chords take a rest. And the guitar goes. Ascends up. It's the higher ones. Now we actually return, rhythmically speaking, to the percussive section, revolving a lot around the D minor or the D and the E. Have a lot of utilization of the blues note or the sharp 4 note from the minor perspective. A lot of kind of sweeping action going on. In this section, and you can hear it in the tab actually. So in the actual track, what they do here is they play some chords or something like that and make kind of a weird sound, and I think they use the whammy too. And what they do is they pan that around just really quickly for like nanoseconds. So in the song, you get this quick like shooting back and forth in the speakers, and it's a really cool kind of effect that they do just to make things stand out some. Okay, got some more septuplets going on, or sextuplets going on right here. Once again, some stuff is appearing out of key. Just makes things feel really crazy and really intense, and some really, really cool stuff. So in this next part of the solo, they kind of return to the pre-chorus. So now one thing you'll see right here for this section of the solo is that I kind of interpreted, once again, the chords underline it and the key underline it in a method that was designed to get the least amount of accidentals and such like that. Maybe not necessarily the best way to look at it, as I said before. That's just how I looked at it here, and like I said, if there's any better ways to look at this, please let me know, because I definitely would like a better way to look at this if there is one. So let's go ahead and continue on. One thing that's worth pointing out right here is that compared to the chords going on underneath, a lot of these notes in this sweep section are actually avoiding the chord tones, which is very interesting. Don't typically see that. You see the inverse most of the time, but they are doing it in this case, and it adds a really unique sound to it, that's for sure. So let's go ahead and move on to the last part of the solo. So not too much to say here, just kind of sequencing through. Sounds very cool. The only thing I wanted to point out is at the start of each beat, of each measure, as the chord hits, you see a lot of staying within the actual chords themselves. You have the 5 right here, 5, 3. Again, just adding a lot of unity and cohesion to the song by doing that. So it works out pretty well. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to say, great way to end the solo. Right here, they move from standard 16th notes to 16th notes triplets. Just gives a lot of speed and push and intensity for that very last part of it. Makes it sound super fast and super intense, and it's really, really cool. So, moving on to the very last chorus, I believe. So, same stuff right here. You have the progression that we've discussed in the past. So now in this section of the chorus, the only difference to point out here is that along with that, you have lead lines that are now harmonized. Harmonized to thirds, very standard. Also sounds very good though, as it always does. So yeah, good stuff right there. Just wanted to point out once again, pads following along very closely here with what the chords are doing to give a lot more high-end information, high-end frequencies to just kind of fill the song out best as possible. Very quiet in this mix. In this Guitar Pro track, but they're there and they sound really good. All right, so going to see what the final parts are, if there are any, because we're nearing the end of this. Let's see what's going on here. So we go on, and I'll just go ahead and play it for us, actually. Okay, so this section right here, the song is basically returning to kind of the intro riff and everything like that. Gonna play it with some variations, do it really cool and everything. They start off returning to the intro riff by doing a whammy dive. It's really cool. Pushing that thing down. All right, so here they get back to it. Now, there is a keyboard solo going on here. Let's go ahead and check that out real quick. What's going on here? Shredding all over the place. Now, so as you saw, pretty much this entire keyboard solo, if I'm not mistaken, is more or less staying very well in key. Now, along with that, one thing I want to point out that the rhythm guitars are doing, let's go ahead and get back to the very first part of this outro riff in its whole. Okay, so we're playing it in the same key. It's E Phrygian as it's always been throughout this entire song. Now, right here coming up in a second, though, they transition up to a G minor, and it moves into a sort of G minor way of doing it, which is cool. They modulate upwards. So they change the key, and you see that the keyboard solo changes with it. It gives a ton of intensity, a ton of upward push to everything, really like an exciting way to finish out the song. Then the final part of the song goes still in the same key that we just modulated to. There's some harmonies going on here, harmonies to the extent of being third harmonies, I believe. Let's see right here. Yeah, so we have your G there, and actually, no, they're not third harmonies. They're harmonies to fifths and everything, which is pretty unique. You don't typically see that quite as much. So what you have here are essentially power chords played like across both speakers by both guitarists. Then it outros with some chords, again, in the same key. And as it goes, closes out. Lots of double bass, lots of kind of noise, lots of whammy action and everything. And then, of course, in the very last part of the song, you have the line from American Psycho, "My pain is constant and dark," blah, 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 whatever it says next. So, yeah, really, really cool song. Very interesting song to analyze. Definitely probably one of the biggest songs that I've looked at so far that I'd be happy to hear other opinions on. Because, like I said, there are some, like, kind of, up to interpretation, up to, like, sort of different viewpoints, things that I sort of drew from it. And I'd be down to hear what other people would have to say on it. So, if you have any comments on it, anything you think I could have done better or looked at in a different fashion for this song, for the keys I derived or anything, go ahead and just let me know. I'd appreciate that. Guys, if you like this video, I really appreciate it. I would hope that you guys would want to check out a new song that I put out. It's on Spotify right now. It's called Telestial Fray. All you need to do is go ahead and go into Spotify and type in Spike Signal. It's the same exact way you see it on YouTube right here. And you'll bring up the song. And if you wanted to let me know what you think of it, that'd be totally awesome. Or if not, just go ahead and take a listen to it, and that'd work fine for me too. So I appreciate you taking the time, y'all. If you'd like to see more like this, go ahead and keep it right here at the Spike Signal. Thank you.